If you've ever been tasked with building a sales team or a sales culture that you did not create, then you know how challenging it is to step into something that already exists and then be tasked with putting some structure around whatever that is and making it something solid so that it can move forward. Trust me, it is not for the faint of heart. I'm Dr. Nadia, founder of the Doyen Agency and host of the Sales Culture Unfiltered podcast. And on today's episode, I'm talking about exactly that. When you're tasked with building a sales culture, a sales team or department that you didn't create, you didn't hire these people, but now you're responsible for turning it into something amazing. Oh, yeah. That one is a challenge for the books. And if that's you, I invite you, tune in. Welcome to Sales Culture Unfiltered, the podcast where we get real about what actually makes or breaks high-performing sales teams. I'm your host, Dr. Nadia Y. Brown, a sales culture and communication architect, and I work with sales leaders to engineer high-impact teams that hit their numbers without burning out or breaking down. On this show, we dive into unfiltered conversations with sales leaders, industry experts, and high-performing teams about what it really takes to drive revenue, retain talent, and build a winning sales culture. If you're tired of surface-level advice and want the strategies, challenges, and hard-won wins that actually matter, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Congratulations. Maybe you were just promoted into a new sales role. Or maybe you were brought in to an existing sales team and now you are tasked with building this sales culture and really defining it. Or maybe your company or organization has finally decided to actually define the sales role and maybe really define the sales process or the sales department. And you were the lucky person who was selected to make that happen. Either way, one of the challenges is you're stepping into something that already exists. And whether it is formally defined as a specific type of sales culture, trust me, there is a culture, whether leadership likes it or not, that already exists. So, what do you actually do when you are leading or you've been invited to lead a sales culture that you did not build? And frankly, no one can really tell you what is exactly supposed to look like. If you were here for part one, in part one of this series, I talked about building a foundation. Like, what does that look like in building the foundation, particularly after you've moved out of the startup phase and now you're wanting some more structure as you're building and growing. And this episode, I really want to look at now you're here. You are the one that has been tasked with taking this, whatever this is, and making it something more formal, making it something that's documented, making it something that has legs that can really support continued growth. However, you weren't the one that created it. And now you're stepping in and you're just like, okay. And here's the thing, there are already people that have been here. So they have often, when you look at an existing culture, I liken it to my family recently moved, and our daughter is now attending a brand new school. And I remember one of her fears was being the new kid. Like up until this point, she had never been the new kid. She started at her school and kindergarten. And honestly, some of her friends, they've been together since preschool and they've moved together for many years together. They were together. And now we're in a whole new place. And she's been invited. Well, not really. That's to be true. She wasn't invited. Her parents were like, girl, you're going to school. She's now tasked with stepping into this new role, if you will, as a new student. And her biggest concern was, I don't want to be the new kid. Like, I don't know what that is. And it's not about her ability to make friends, but it is that discomfort that many of us may feel when you're stepping into something new and you don't yet know all the things and you don't know where the restrooms are and you don't really know like how lunchtime looks and things like that. And so when you look at stepping into this now as this leader into something you did not build, you did not create it, but now you are responsible for the future of what this could really look like. And so let's just start with acknowledging that inheriting a sales culture and building one from scratch looks very different. When you're inheriting this culture, one of the things is you obviously know how to do what it is that you do. Like you don't lack the ability, but one of the things that you do lack is how do I discern or decipher those nuances that occur in cultures where people just know there are things that they just get, like there are just things that we just do. I find it that oftentimes when I'm working through my own processes and I'm working to get things out of my head because they're just the things that I just do, it's sometimes challenging because I'm just like, wait, I just know to do that. How do I know to do that? And do I need to actually explicitly say to do that? And so there are those things that you walk into where an existing sales culture, you're just like, okay, what is that? And you're not always sure of how to define that, right? The other thing is that people are people. Let's be clear. And when you're coming in to an existing culture, not everyone is going to be excited about your arrival, right? And not everyone is going to be excited about the fact that now your arrival signals some level of disruption. Even if you're not tasked with like changing all the things, it can feel disruptive because we've been allowed, we being the existing team, to just kind of do however, whatever we're doing right now, we're just doing it. And we haven't necessarily been tasked with stopping and assessing how we do what we do, why we do what we do, who does what and when. That hasn't been our reality. We just inherently know it. And there's comfort in that. And there's also some level sometimes of just this protectiveness of this is how we do it, this is why we do it, and why are you asking me all these questions? Not necessarily from a place, not always from a place of malice, but we're just like, I have work to do. I have this thing, and I just know, and I don't know why you don't know, but you need to figure it out. So you do sometimes have to work through the resistance. Let's just be clear, right? There is often resistance to one, just being able to talk about how we do what we do, what it is that we do, how do we make certain determinations about who's an ideal fit? Because what happens on paper and what happens in reality aren't always the same thing, right? How these next steps happen, we just, after a while, when you're in a culture, you just know. I just know that I know. I don't always know how I know, but I just know. And when you are that person that has been tasked with coming in and figuring these things out, it can be challenging, especially if you run into resistance, whether it is overt resistance or covert, and just people just don't make it a priority to support you and getting you the information that you need. It can feel very challenging and sometimes uncomfortable. Like, why am I even having to go through this, right? But it is par for the course. So I wanted to really bring that up because I wanted to say you're not doing anything wrong. And it's not necessarily that your team doesn't like you or they're doing anything wrong. It's just that you all have different priorities. They already know how to do this. They already know the things. Even if they don't always know why they do certain things, or even if what they're doing isn't always the best way to do it, unfortunately, it is how it's been done. And many of us, when we get that level of comfort, we're like, this is what we've always done. This is how it's always worked. And if it's working to any modicum of success, most people don't want to change it. Like, why fix it if it's not broken? So you do have those challenges of those different mindsets that may pop up on your team because it's not broken. Why do we need to fix it? Even if you can see that this is going to be problematic in the future, your team may not have that level of insight, and particularly because they're sitting at a different place and that's not their primary focus. You may have some people who do, but you may not. So just be prepared for that. The second one is the documentation problem. We don't always write the things down. It is definitely a challenge, even in the work that I do and helping companies and teams with documenting the steps and the things and the processes. Even I, within my own team, am like, oh, wait, I need to pause and take all these things out of my head and write them down. Or remembering to pause and if I'm walking through something that I do a certain way, recording it, right? Like there we have so many tools available to us, but oftentimes when you're walking into a culture that still needs that refining, finessing, there's often a gap when it comes to documentation. You may have no documentation, like nothing is documented and it all lives in someone else's head. Or you may have some documentation, but it's incomplete and you still have to do some info gathering and mining for information to get what it is for you to help fill in the gaps. And again, a lot of times this is not coming from a place of malice. It's just that it's just on a the lowest piece of priority, right? Like our priority is getting the things done. Our priority is getting sales closed. Our priority is serving our clients. And oh yeah, I probably should write that down and how I made that happen. That comes later. And there's other documentation that obviously a lot of times comes before that in terms of custom client notes and just things like that. So when you get down to the how I did what I did and why I did it, I didn't have time for that. So being prepared to go in and do an assessment if you haven't already in terms of what do we have, what do we need, and who are the people that I need to speak with to gather all of this information. And then who is going to be part of your team, if you will, in terms of just validating that entire process and getting those things documented. So it's usually a documentation gap. Hopefully it's like this and not like this, but be prepared that it's probably just it's not even existent. You got it doesn't even exist. It's just a figment of your imagination, and now you got to go find all of this information to make it happen. And then the third thing is probably it's probably very, I won't say the most challenging because I feel like all these can be challenging in and of themselves, especially depending on your personality. But it's definitely one of those things where it's not always obvious or instinctive. And that is building trust before building the process. Again, when you're stepping into a new team, that norm it's already been formed. Even if people don't even like each other, that whatever that is, that existing culture is there. And now you're stepping into it and you can be seen as an outsider, even if you were previously part of the team or the organization in a different way, because your role has shifted, how people view you also can shift. Doesn't have to, but it can. So just be prepared for having to first build trust before building the process. And if you're like me, I have to pause because I'm just like, we just need to get it done. I'm gonna get it done, girl. So let's go, let's go, let's go, let's get the things done. I see this process. I know exactly what needs to happen. Let's go make it happen. Pause. First, we have to override that instinct to just get down to work. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves. I'll have on sleeves today, but roll up my imaginary sleeves and get to work. But I know that I need to pause because there are some relationships and there are some things, there's some trust that I need to build in order to truly create cooperation, but also buy-in to what it is, that bigger vision of what the organization, what the founder, even what you as the leader are trying to do. And sometimes we don't do that. You've seen it. I see it quite often. And it's funny because a lot of times people view that approach in a negative light. They want to hire the proverbial bull in a china shop and just come in and wreck everything up and shake people up and do all the things. I'm not saying a shakeup is not required or necessary. However, I have found it to be more prudent to help improve the speed at which you can get certain things done and to, again, get the buy-in necessary to support the vision is first look at those individuals where gaining their trust within this existing culture and really helping them to buy into the vision of what it is that you're trying to build is important. Even if later some of those people, whether it's by their own choice or not, choose to not remain a part of what it is becoming, typically going in beginning and just focusing on process only adds a layer of difficulty that you may not have needed to add. And so I invite you to not just even, I know it's so hard, and sometimes you have a lot of pressure, and we got to get this done. We need this done. We need this done. We needed it done yesterday. But there is a layer of let me get to know people, start to build those relationships. That's obviously going to look different for every culture, but you want to make sure that you are taking the time because that looks very different. And I personally feels like it lends itself to your success because now you have team, you have support, you have buy-in, you that increases your chances of actual cooperation. And again, even if you're stepping into something that's exceptionally dysfunctional and you're like, oh my God, these people got to go, you have a list of folks. It doesn't have to be so outrageously disruptive. It can be. I think of a colleague, she and I have been talking, and I remember she walked into an organization she was working with, and they needed to let someone go. Like as they were looking at the culture, there were some decisions that had been made prior to her arrival, right? She's stepping into something that already exists. It's already an existing culture. She wasn't just focused on the sales function for this particular story. And there were some decisions that needed to be made, especially around like personnel and certain things like that. It's always sticky when you're now talking about shifting people and their roles or whether they're even going to remain a part of the organization. Like I get it, it is not a fun place to be. So as she's working through getting this information and doing the documentation and all the pieces that they needed to fill in for this organization, it became clear that a key member, I may add, of the team needed to go. Ooh, yeah, needed to go. And it was a very challenging several months, honestly, because again, this was a key person. They could. I won't say they couldn't. They made the choice to not just snatch this person out of this role, but to be strategic. They probably removed that person sooner than what they would have wanted in terms of just what they needed to do and the certain things they wanted to get in place and how that build would have looked. However, as they were going through the process, that person just became very combative. It was becoming a situation where her remaining part of the organization was going to be more harmful than not. So they made the decision to part ways. And again, building that trust is important, but it's not a guarantee that it won't be messy on the back end when you're coming in to really build that. And so, really, just looking at how that inherited culture is very different from one that you build from scratch. And not that you won't have your own unique challenges that present themselves when you're building from scratch, but it often looks very different than when you're stepping into something and you're looking to build. I think one of the things that I've noticed, at least in my work, because when we go in and we're building, there's obviously something that's already there. Even if there's no existing team, there's something there. Like we walk into companies that are already successful and gathering the pieces to make that and filling in all the blanks can sometimes be challenging because it's almost like a game of scavenger hunt. Like, where am I going to find all of these pieces? But they are critical. And sometimes people don't always understand why that part is so important because in a sales function, the main function is to generate sales. Like, can we just get to the good stuff? Right. And especially you work with salespeople, they want to go do their job. They don't want to really talk to you about why I do what I do and how I do what I do. But it is an important piece. So being able to be strategic in how you approach that, particularly whether you're coming in as a consultant to build it, or again, you're stepping into this leadership role and you've inherited this and now you're trying to figure out what does this look like moving forward And what are the pieces that I need to build? Like the foundation is key, but that's not the only piece of the things that you're actually adding or figuring out as you're moving forward with building the vision of what that can be. And then finally, what culture building from the middle actually requires is definitely one, patience. It requires an ability to take the bull by the horns, if you will. It requires a level of authority that matches the level of accountability. And I think this is one of the challenges with being in the middle because you sometimes have a level of responsibility that doesn't always match your level of authority to help drive the cooperation that you need, right? So there is that level of you need the level of authority that matches your level of accountability. And if not, that's just honestly a big time, one, it's a big time red flag, but also it can really be detrimental to your success. If you're expected to produce results from a function, but you don't actually have control, then that's more of a structural problem. And that needs to be addressed. So, again, your level of authority needs to match your level of accountability when you are building from the middle. That's definitely required. And you also, it requires executive buy in. It really does. Like you need that support. I talked a lot about the documentation, building the foundation, all the things because I know how important it is. But as I also mentioned, it requires buy-in, not just from your team or even your peers, but also from the top. Whatever the top looks like, you need that buy-in, that support because it needs to be reinforced that this is an important part of the process. It's not the only part, but it is an important part of the process. And without that buy in, again, it's going to be detrimental to your success. Like you just won't have the same level of results. And oftentimes you get pushback because we value speed. And a lot of times when people want to get to what they want to get to, and it feels like I'm slowing down, which actually you are slowing down to, again, document, build. And so you need that level of buy in order for it to work. Otherwise, it's a battle. And it may be a battle that you don't win if you don't have the right support on your team. And so you want to really, again, talk about what does success look like. I like to talk about why. Like, why are we doing this? Even if people don't really understand it, I like to answer that question. And it may be because, again, I'm a mom. I have a 10-year-old. I hear why a lot. So I think I've been trained and conditioned to just start, okay, then make sure why is also part of this conversation, but also remembering that I don't have to get to say it just once. I may need to remind people repeatedly, this is the vision. This is why we're doing some of the not so fun parts. And I understand that there may be resistance to this. It may not even be my favorite part of this process, but I also understand the importance of this for the future that we're all working toward, right? So, really being prepared to have that conversation and address those those challenges, those questions is really important. Because right now, when you're thinking about bringing in new hires and growing the sales department, or again, defining the sales department and building it and bringing in new people as you're building, it's more difficult for new hires when your process lives in someone else's head. Your new hires can definitely come up to speed far faster, be contributing a lot sooner once it's documented and it's visible. So we need to really talk about that. But again, understanding that and having that buy-in, having that authority, and being and committing to the process. That's the other thing. A lot of times, sometimes because it's not always the favorite part, it can feel like it's slowing down all types of progress. You may deal with a great deal of resistance. It can be easy to abandon mission and leave it unfinished as you focus on more urgent matters. Don't buy into that temptation and figure out a way as you're looking at your plan to make sure that piece is complete. Because moving forward, again, the future of the organization, new people are coming in at some point. We want to set them up for success. That is a very important part of why we're doing what it is that we're doing. So again, you may have stepped into this new thing. You may have been promoted. Congratulations. But you're finding yourself in this space of I'm building something, or I'm being tasked with building something or creating something or moving something forward that I didn't start. I didn't lay this foundation. I didn't create whatever is happening. And now I need to figure out how I'm going to do all these pieces and navigate this in order for me to be successful. And if I'm being honest, it's probably one of the hardest things to do as a leader is to step into something that's existing and then take it and keep it moving forward. Like, it is not easy. It is not for the faint of heart. Trust me. So again, episode 1, we talked a lot about the importance of building the foundation. In this episode, we talked about, navigating one of the hardest leadership challenges there is, frankly, is, stepping into something that exists, you didn't create, but now your responsibility is to make it work. And sometimes you're like, make it work. What does that even mean? You may not even know what that means. So understand, you aren't failing at all. You're not failing. However, it's definitely something that you need to maybe take a step back so that you can understand what it is that you have inherited, so that you can decide fully what needs to change and how you want things to look moving forward. And in episode 3, so in the next episode in this series, we're going to talk about how to actually start building, regardless of where you are in the organization. So again, you may be at the top, you may be somewhere else. That doesn't mean that you can't contribute to the building of a solid sales team, a solid sales department, organization, and really impact the sales culture in a positive way. So stay tuned for part 3. It's coming up soon, and I can't wait to see you there. Bye-bye. That's a wrap on today's episode of Sales Culture Unfiltered. But the conversation doesn't end here. If something sparked your interest today, connect with me on LinkedIn or visit our website at thedoyenagency.com to explore how we're helping sales teams build cultures that last. And if you found this episode valuable, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow sales leader. See you next time.